All right, y'all. So we've got a massive interview here from Akio Iyoku, the executive producer of Dragon Ball Capsule Corporation and Toriyama's right-hand man for years. And we're going to get to this interview because there's a lot of really interesting stuff he talks about in relation to Dragon Ball Daima and Super and everything involving like the behind the scenes and the creation of this. I was actually going to do a video this coming week, or I'm sorry, early next week, going into some of these topics, but now that this is out, we can go into it here on this video. I want to let everybody know though, this Friday on Daima is a very big episode. There's going to be huge things happening. There's a huge monumental event going on this Friday with episode 18. So I'm letting you know now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my review with a non-spoiler thumbnail, so you're not going to get spoiled on what happens on the big twist. But later on in the day, like closer to the afternoon, the evening time, I'll switch it over. That should give everybody plenty of time to watch the show on Crunchyroll or whatever streaming service you have. Now, if you happen to be in one of those countries that you get the show a week late, I can't do anything about that, man. Like, I can't control people that get it a week late. I would suggest going out of your way to see it because there's going to be spoilers everywhere and not from me. There's a very good chance, in fact, I can almost guarantee that Toei Animation themselves are going to be releasing pictures like right after the episode airs in Japan. So you really, if you're trying to avoid spoilers, I'm letting you know now, on your device, stay off of social media, stay off of everything until you see the episode. It's the best advice I can give you, not because of me necessarily, but because a lot of folks are going to be talking about this. If you don't care, you don't care. So let's go ahead and get to this interview here, which was translated by Herms. This interview actually appeared in this website, mantanweb.jp. And as Dragon Ball Daima comes to a close, now Akio is going into a lot of information that we, quite frankly, didn't know, at least not entirely. So Herm starts out by saying Akio discusses Daima's origin. 6 years ago, during DBS Superheroes production, they decided to do a new TV series. At first, Toriyama's involvement was going to be minimal, but he really got into it, creating most of it in the end. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail here on the video because there's a lot more to this that you don't know, but you will know. And there's also more to it that will be revealed next week because I'm not going to go into what happens on Daima this Friday, but I think you'll have a better understanding of this. So if we go back 6 years ago was 2019. Now, there's already people who have been theorizing that maybe instead of Dragon Ball Super, because remember, the Dragon Ball Super in 2019 thing, like I've already explained what happened, but there's people who have been theorizing that maybe when the rumors started going around about Super, that actually internally people thought it was going to be Super, but it was actually Daima. I don't know that for certain. I can't sit here and say for sure that's the case. I know there was more anime coming in 2019 before plans changed. So this tells me that maybe it was all the way back in 2019 when the idea of doing a different anime besides Super was pitched. In which case, it's a bit weird because Super was still running in the manga. In 2019, the Tournament of Power was actually still going on, and the Moral arc began close to the end of the year. So, and also, I should say this too. Make sure you watch this video all the way to the end because you're going to get a lot of information. Trust me. And you'll want to hear this. So, the Moral arc was at the end of 2019, right around then. So, I wonder if this was supposed to be like the pitch while the manga kept going. I'm going to go more into that next week because there is a reason as to why Dragon Ball Daima takes place before Super. And I'm going to get into all of that in a future video very, very soon. But this already sort of gives you a little bit of insight about what was going on. So Toriyama's involvement was supposed to be minimal. Now, when it comes to Super, believe it or not, Toriyama's involvement in Super was not as much as people thought it was. The Broly movie, Resurrection F, Superhero, he wrote the scripts for those. For Dragon Ball Super, he didn't do that. He wrote a manuscript that Toei took and added to. So there's a lot of things in Dragon Ball Super that Toriyama did not authorize or come up with. For example, Vegito Blue. That was not part of Toriyama's manuscript for the Goku Black arc. Same thing with the character of Kale. Like, there's a lot of stuff that Toei decided to add in that wound up going to the manga and just kind of became like a thing. Like, everybody knows Kale now. Everybody knows Vegito Blue now. So, but this time Toriyama was very involved. Okay, the next thing here. Iyoku says Daima was intended to be a show that parents could watch with their children, so it was made to appeal to both kids and adults in their 30s who were kids back when Dragon Ball GT first aired. So yes, making Goku and Company kids was specifically done to appeal to the GT generation. Now, I want to get into this real quick. So, obviously many of you guys know that a lot of folks hate Dragon Ball GT. In fact, many of you don't like GT. And I do understand why. GT does have a lot of issues, and it's also following Dragon Ball Z, so there were a lot of, the bar was pretty high, right? Toriyama had very little involvement in GT, but he did have some. Now, what I find interesting about this whole GT thing is that he's basically saying that, like, it was appealing to the GT generation, which means people that had also seen Z. And what that tells me, because here's the thing you guys have to understand. Even though a lot of folks hate GT, in Japan, it's not that hated. There's a lot of misinformation out there about GT. You may want to watch the video I did called The Truth About Dragon Ball GT back in 2017. Yes, GT is not very well liked by a lot of people, but it's not anywhere near as hated in Japan. There are folks that love GT and specifically Super Saiyan 4. Latin American Dragon Ball fans like GT way more than the English speakers do. Now, I'm not sure if that's because of the dub or what, but also GT had a weird release schedule in America. But the point is that you may look at this and say, this is crazy. Why would you want to appeal to GT fans? And it's like, because in Japan, it's not that hated. Now, a lot of folks were jokingly calling it GT 2.0. I'm not going to say it actually is GT 2.0. I'm going to say it's more so GT 2.5. And here's why I'm saying that. You might think it's semantics. The Demon Realm and all that stuff was not in GT. The characters in Daima aren't really that similar to the ones in GT. At least not the villains. You can say that Pansy is like Pan and Glorio is somewhat of a replacement of like Trunks, but not really. So there's many differences, but there's definitely about 5 or 6 things that Daima took from GT. Like, you can't even argue that. You can't argue that. What I've been saying in my reviews, you've been paying attention and watching the reviews and streams, I've been saying that Dragon Ball Daima borrows from everything, from Dragon Ball Z, Super, GT, and Heroes, and Dragon Ball Heroes. I'm going to go a lot more into this in that video, I promise, because I have to wait for Friday. It'll all make sense for you guys when I get the video out. But there's a reason as to why Daima is making these decisions. It's not just something that they, aren't thinking about. But we'll get more into that. So let's continue with the interview here. Herms says, while making Goku a kid was seen as making the series accessible to a wider audience, it was Toriyama's idea to turn the entire main cast into kids. So that's good to know. Toriyama was also concerned many people wouldn't know DB's story, hence the general overview at the start of Daima's episode. So this is one of the funny things about Akira Toriyama that you might be surprised at. Akira Toriyama is... When he died, man, the whole world was mourning. But Toriyama never really understood how big Dragon Ball was around the world. Like, it never clicked with him. Obviously, he was making money, and obviously, he was collecting checks from the series, royalties, but Toriyama didn't even know how big or how hardcore fans would be about this series, even the ones that didn't speak Japanese. Toriyama was very, he was a very humble man in the sense that he never acted like he was a big shot. He never acted like he was, he didn't really have like an ego, even though he had every reason to have an ego because he created a legendary series that wasn't him. So he didn't understand how much Americans love Dragon Ball, or Europeans, or Spanish people, all of us. He didn't get it. And it's silly to me because we're looking at this and we're like, dude, like Dragon Ball's one of the biggest anime ever. One of the top 3 biggest of all time. Like, and manga too. So it's like he didn't know. And I actually love that about the guy, that he just never knew how big it was. So that's why they recap it a lot. Now, what they're saying here is kind of what I've been saying, that Dragon Ball Daima is made for hardcore fans who watched DB, Z, GT, Super, etc., all the other stuff, but also to introduce their kids to it. So it's like their whole logic is everybody who was a kid in Japan back in the 90s now has their own kids. So it's like a generational thing. Kind of like Cobra Kai or other franchises like Ghostbusters. When they do these reboots, it's to sort of introduce the children of the people that were fans back in the day. So compared to the movies, there was more time to develop Daima's story, with much back and forth with Toriyama to flesh things out. So much so that the story wasn't fully completed by the time the anime's production had began, similar to the original manga's run in that regard. So this is a detail that I did not know about. This is news to me. I didn't know they were cutting it that close. And what's crazy about all that is, remember, Toriyama passed away in March of 2024. Production for this series, actual like production when it came to like Toei's part of it, was in 2022. A lot of those character designs that you've seen in the past, the ones that I've revealed or other people in the fandom have revealed, those are from 2022, yo. Like, they're not new. So that would tell me that even though they had all the characters designed, there were still things that weren't fine-tuned. And now I'm starting to wonder if maybe that's why the pacing is so weird. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that's why the pacing in Daima was so strange. Like, that could be why. Because it's almost like they cut it really, really close. And that's a dangerous thing. And it's funny because I remember when me and some of the leakers had heard about this web series, we were wondering when they were going to announce it. And if you guys remember, there were people who were saying, like, it's going to be announced on this day, on this day. And I wasn't sure. That's why I kept saying lower your expectations. I knew it was real. But then it got announced in 2023 at New York Comic Con. It was like, okay, well, there it is. But it took a while, right? Okay, so let me keep going. I actually have more to add to this, too. When Toriyama was developing Daima, one of the things I was told is that when it came to the demon realm, he really wanted to expound upon it. And I think Akio actually goes into that a little bit in this interview as we continue. He says, among the various new bits of backstory revealed in Daima, Iyoku was particularly surprised by the idea that people with pointed ears originally came from the demon realm. He believed Toriyama had this vaguely in his mind for a while and didn't just come up with it for Daima's sake. I 100% believe that's possible. And also, Namekians being from the demon realm, that one has been hinted even before Daima, even before Super. There were people theorizing that the Namekians were actually from the demon realm. So, like, obviously there wasn't enough evidence yet, but it was there. And the thing is, Toriyama's, when he started writing Daima, his imagination went wild. This is why we have, like, the 3 different demon worlds, why we have the backstory with Abura, why we have, like, you know, all the stuff that Daima gave us, like the Glin stuff and Neva and the Tamagami. That was just Toriyama dumping a bunch of ideas out, which is why in the video I did called Can Dragon Ball Continue Without Toriyama, it worries me because even though as a writer he has his flaws, as a creative guy, as a real creative world builder, there's not many on his level, you feel me? So that's one thing that, and I'm going to go more into that in detail, but yes, Toriyama had a lot to do with all of this like Grimus and all that. That was not even in the plans prior to Daima. Like the Ryma stuff, like that wasn't supposed to be revealed in Super or anything like that. At least not based on what we know. That was something that Toriyama had sort of come up with during the era of Daima. But the pointy ears thing is one that Akio thinks was there for a while. Okay, Iyoku wanted to expand Dragon Ball and thinks it'll still be loved even 50 years from now. Well, that's true. But he's not specific on future plans. He concludes by saying Daima's climax will be both predictable and unpredictable in parts. Well, Dragon Ball is predictable and unpredictable, right? Like how many things... There's a very famous video that I put out years ago, 10 years ago, where I was like, guys, there is no evil Goku. Broly's not coming back. Trunks is not coming back. It was like a joke because everything I said that wasn't coming actually came. The video was supposed to be about like these clickbait YouTubers that were lying. And then it turns out that the stuff that I was saying wasn't in Super wound up being in Super after I said it. And it's very funny because I look at that video and I've been memed over it, but I have a sense of humor about it because it's so weird that it actually came true. Like, who would have thought they would have rebooted Broly? Like, who would have thought that? Who would have thought that Dragon Ball Daima would be doing what it's doing, especially this Friday? You'll see. So it says, and rewatching from the beginning afterwards will heighten the fun. So that's the end of the interview. Akio's basically saying that it's a better show to binge, which people who don't like Daima are going to disagree with that. People who like Daima might agree with that. I feel like that makes sense, that this show would be better to binge because I remember hearing that if you read the Moro and Granola arcs in one sitting, or in two sittings, if you actually like read them, like you binge read them, they actually read better, and there's truth to that. Like, the Granola arc has a bunch of flaws, don't get me wrong, but, like, reading it all back, like, without having to wait a month, does kind of feel different. So, maybe that's what Akio's suggesting, I don't know. But yeah, lots of tidbits here. There's going to be more I'm going to get into soon, especially details about, like, Toriyama's ideas for the Demon Realm and why it was different from GT and why they chose not to do the Grand Tour. All that stuff I'll get into in a future video. Stay tuned for more. Tomorrow, Mandalorian, and Friday's the big day. Remember, guys, if you don't want to be spoiled, just be careful out there. I love you. Take care. See you later this week.